I'm sitting here debating my problem with myself. I'm divorced due to a cheating wife, going on a year now. I have no kids and no immediate family in the area. I'm telling you this because I find myself wanting another man's wife. I don't know if it's love, need, lust, infatuation, or just a simple desire to have her. Part of it, I know, is revenge. I don't know her that well, but I've seen her often when I go to lunch. She works in the same building as I do. I've been trying to gather as much information on her as possible. I'm determined to be with her, but the problem is, then what? It's a horrible feeling to want someone so intensely that I'd even consider doing something drastic if necessary. So far, I've learned she's around 30 years old, has a nice petite build, and is married to a guy who seems like a loser from what I can tell. They don't have kids, and she's somewhat of a flirt. Her husband? A loser, because he doesn't appreciate what he has and is willing to risk losing her. Worst of all, he's the guy who broke up my marriage. He was the one who got involved with my wife, and now I want to make him pay by doing the same thing to him. I figure if I manage to be with her, I'll be doing her a favor too. In case you haven't figured it out, I've gone a bit crazy ever since I caught my wife cheating. I came home early one day, just walked into the house, not really paying much attention, and headed to our bedroom to change. That's when I saw it, my wife, right there in the middle of the bed with another man. She saw me and screamed, and he, oblivious to my presence at first, thought he was doing a great job. I grabbed him by the shoulders, pulled him off her, and threw him to the floor. I wasn't done. I started hitting him, beating him until he was a mess. My wife just kept screaming. After I gave him a good beating, I dragged him to the door, tossed him out onto the street, naked. I threw his wallet and car keys onto the grass but left his clothes behind. He stumbled to his car, bruised and bleeding, and drove off. I didn't see or hear from him again until fate intervened later. After that, I walked back into the bedroom where my wife was hurriedly getting dressed, crying, "Kevin, it's not what it looked like. Please, let's talk. We can work this out." "Not what it looked like?" I asked. "It looked like you were with that guy in our bed. Were you with him or not?" "Please, Kevin, let me explain." I interrupted her. "Either you were or you weren't. Which is it?" "It's not that hard of a question." She hesitated, and I cut her off again. "Since you're having such a hard time answering that, our conversation is over. I'm going out to have dinner. You have 1 hour to grab your things and leave. If you're still here when I get back, I'm going to throw you out. That's the end of this conversation." And with that, I walked out. I waited 2 hours before returning, hoping she'd be gone. I'm a man of my word, and I would have forced her to leave if necessary, even though she was my wife. When I got back, she was gone, along with most of her personal things. She left a note. I didn't want to read it at first, but I figured I should. "Dearest Kevin, I made a mistake, a really big mistake. Jim doesn't mean anything to me. He was just an old school friend. We were lovers back then, before you and I met. You knew I had someone before we got married. It was Jim, my first love. Seeing him again just brought back memories. I should have known better, but things just happened. I'm so sorry for hurting you. Please reconsider taking me back. I promise to be faithful. I really do love you, Kevin. Love always. Rachel." The note just made things worse. Now, the guy had a name, Jim. I loved my wife, but I'm one of those people who believes that love can be completely lost. And in my case, it was. It was replaced by revenge. Revenge isn't necessarily something you want, it's just something you have to do. I would get my revenge. I called off work the next day, knowing I had to change our checking and savings accounts. I contacted most of the credit card companies and canceled them, keeping 2 that were in my name only for any expenses I might need. I'm hard-nosed, and I'm not afraid to admit it, that's just the way it is. Rachel's dad, George, called to ask what was going on between me and his daughter. I got angry and snapped, "What's wrong with you? You didn't have the guts to ask your own daughter?" "Well, let me tell you, George, I caught your precious daughter with another man in her bed. I'm not the forgiving kind, so I threw her out. She had a chance to take what she wanted, and I'm not giving her another dime. If she wants to take this to court, that's fine with me. Otherwise, leave me alone. I hung up the phone. 2 days later, Rachel's younger sister Karen called, asking if I'd talk to her for a few minutes. I told her to go ahead. She started off by saying how sorry Rachel was, but I cut her off. I don't care how sorry Rachel is. Do you have anything else to say? If you mention her name again, I'll hang up. Your sister doesn't exist in my life anymore. Karen asked if there were any of Rachel's personal items left at the house. I told her that Rachel had an hour to take everything she wanted, and if she forgot something, that was her problem. Karen mentioned a few items, and I could feel my anger rising. So I responded in the only way I knew how. Tell you what, Karen, you come over here, and maybe we can work something out. Otherwise, the stuff's going to the trash. She screamed back at me, how dare you talk to me like that? Wait until I tell my husband. I wasn't worried. Does that mean I'm not going to get a chance to see you? I joked. I always thought you'd be a bit more fun. Maybe send your husband instead, and I'll talk to him. I wasn't afraid of her husband, he was just a pushover, always doing what Karen told him. I knew he'd never show up at my door. I heard someone else in the background on the phone, it had to be Rachel. Then I heard her voice shout, Kevin, you son of a, but I hung up before she could finish. I called my lawyer, had him draft the papers, and gave Rachel nothing. We were renting the house, we each had our own car, and aside from the savings, there was nothing much left to divide. Rachel didn't fight the divorce, and I made it clear I wouldn't be talking to anyone in the family except Karen, and only if she met my conditions. Karen was attractive. She was a few years younger than Rachel, both of them good-looking, but Karen had an edge. I was getting ready to move out of the house since the divorce was already final. I called Karen and told her if she wanted to pick up her sister's stuff, she should come soon, or I'd throw it out. She agreed to come by that evening, and I made it clear Rachel wasn't welcome. When Karen arrived, she was alone. I asked where her husband was, but she said he was busy. I knew the truth, he was too scared to come. We walked into the bedroom where I had packed Rachel's things. Karen reached for one of the boxes, but I stopped her. Not so fast, you haven't paid for it yet. She looked at me, shocked. You can't be serious. I'm not going to do anything with you. I laughed. No one's talking about love. Let's be honest, you've been thinking about this for a while. It's just you and me here. No need to pretend. She glared at me, furious. You're just like your sister, I muttered under my breath as I turned and took some of her sister's stuff out to her car. When I came back in, Karen was fuming. You used me for your own pleasure. How can you be so cold, so heartless? What happened to the Kevin who used to care? He died, I said flatly. Your sister killed him. She did to me what I just did to your husband. You got what you wanted, just like she did. Now take her stuff and get out. Don't forget to tell your husband when you get home. He'll probably stay with you, he's weak like that. And don't come back here. I can't stand someone who cheats. Karen called me a scumbag as she grabbed the last of her sister's things and left. She was good company for a moment, but that's all it was, revenge. Nothing more. I knew from the start I only wanted her to settle the score with her sister. All I could think about was revenge, making the perpetrators pay for their actions, that was my goal. I knew it wouldn't solve my problems, but I felt like it was something I just had to do. Right or wrong, I was determined to extract my revenge. Her name was Carrie, a petite and attractive woman I saw nearly every day. Sometimes, an urge builds up inside you, a feeling you can't shake, and that's what happened whenever I saw her. She would come into the restaurant with her friends, laughing and enjoying life. One of those friends was Mara, someone I had known for years. We were friendly but not close, just the kind of relationship where we'd say hello in passing. Mara knew about my divorce. In a small town, everyone knows the rumors. One day, Mara came in alone at lunch. I asked her to join me since I was tired of eating by myself. She seemed a little wary at first, but I assured her it was just lunch. We talked about her family, her husband's promotion, and other everyday things. Eventually, she asked how I was doing since the divorce. Everyone knew Rachel had cheated on me, but no one knew the details. When people asked who the other person was, I'd always say it didn't matter. I shifted the conversation by asking about the new woman in their office. Mara told me her name was Carrie, and that she and her husband, Jim, had moved to town about a year ago. As soon as Mara mentioned Jim's name, something clicked, and I had to find out if he was the same man I suspected. If he was, there was no doubt in my mind, I would get even by going after Carrie. One afternoon, I was having lunch with a friend when Carrie and her husband walked in. My suspicions were confirmed. Jim was the man I had caught with my wife. Rage surged inside me, but I kept my composure. He didn't recognize me, having only seen me for a few seconds before I intervened, but I would never forget him. From that moment, my plan to get back at him was clear. A few days later, Carrie was alone in the restaurant. I seized the opportunity, introduced myself, and mentioned that I was friends with Mara to make her feel comfortable. We shared a laugh, and she eventually joined me at my table. As we talked, she revealed more about herself and her life, mentioning that her husband had a rough start when they moved to town. He had been attacked by two men, robbed, and left with stitches above his eye. That was the explanation I needed for why Jim had never reported me to the police. As our lunches together became more frequent, I started to like Carrie, really like her. She was kind, engaging, and I was torn between my desire for revenge and my genuine fondness for her. One day, I told her that I thought she was one of the most beautiful, kind-hearted women I had ever met, and that if she weren't married, I would ask her out. Carrie seemed nervous but honest as she told me she couldn't cheat on her husband. It wasn't who she was, even though her marriage wasn't perfect. Hearing this, I had to ask what was wrong with her marriage. With tears in her eyes, Carrie confided that she suspected Jim of cheating on her but wasn't certain. I gently took her hand, trying to comfort her. What kind of man would risk losing someone like her, I thought. My mind raced with thoughts of Jim, wondering if he had gone back to Rachel. At that moment, I realized I had to talk to Carrie about something serious, something I couldn't discuss over lunch. Asked if she would meet me after work. I needed her to trust me enough to have a private conversation, somewhere quiet. Kevin, I can't go to your apartment. What would that look like? What would people think? I thought about Rachel for a moment. Why couldn't she have been as thoughtful as this? Carly, it's extremely important that we talk. I care for you too much not to tell you what I know. Please meet with me. I think I trust you, Kevin. I do like you, but I don't know you well enough to be alone with you in an apartment. Can we meet here and talk in the car or at a restaurant? Okay, Carly. Let's meet here after work. I'll even buy you dinner. She smiled and said, "Boy, it must be important if you're willing to buy dinner," and laughed. I needed to get my thoughts in order. What would I say, and how would I say it? I didn't want to risk pushing Carly away. I wanted her for my revenge, but now I wanted her for myself. Yes, the old, hardened part of me, Kevin, was falling for another man's wife. Damn it, this wasn't supposed to happen. I was just supposed to get her attention, make her husband suffer, and laugh. Why did it have to be her? We met for dinner, and Carly told me she had spoken to Marge, who mentioned my divorce and how I had discovered my wife with another man. She said it must have been awful seeing that in my own home. She expressed how sorry she felt for me and how afraid she was of finding out something similar about her husband. She didn't know how she would handle it. Carly, there are a few things I must tell you about myself. I know you're married, but I'm falling in love with you. Please, Kevin, don't say more. I'm a married woman. Carly, I have to tell you. You need to hear this. I'm falling in love with you, but I'm not proud of myself. I've become bitter. Finding my wife with another man did that to me. You've probably heard people say how cold and harsh I've become. I can't help it. I wish I could. I'm always walking around with anger in my heart, and my wife put that there along with her lover. My plan was revenge. I wanted to confront my wife's lover by going after his wife. Carly interrupted. Please, Kevin, you don't need to tell me this. It's so personal, and I can hear how much it hurts you to talk about it. Let me finish, Carly. I was going to use revenge as my release until I met you. Now I have a big problem. The woman I was going to take my revenge on is the one I've fallen in love with." Carly gasped, covering her face. She knew I was talking about her husband, and that she was the woman I had fallen for. Tears streamed down her face. "My God, this is so hard to believe. How do you know? How can you be so sure you were going to use me for revenge against my husband?" She began crying harder. I wanted to comfort her, but she held up her hand. "Please don't touch me. I need a moment to think. Carly, a year ago I found the man in my bedroom. I beat him up and threw him out of my house. I only knew his name was Jim. I then pulled out the note Rachel had left me, the note I had inexplicably held on to. I handed it to Carly, who read it with tears still in her eyes. I've watched you coming into the restaurant for the past 6 months. Every day I looked forward to seeing you. You were the only bright spot in my life, even though I didn't know you well. I found myself slowly falling for you, unaware that you were married. I never approached because of my temper issues and my focus on revenge at the time. One day, I asked Marge about you, and she told me you were married. I felt terrible because I really wanted to get to know you, but I didn't want to interfere with your marriage. Then one day, I saw your husband meet you for lunch, and I realized who he was. It took everything in me not to confront him again. If you had been any other woman, I might have acted out of revenge, but I couldn't do that to you." Carly was crying, her hands folded in front of her. I continued, "I was falling in love with you, and I couldn't hurt someone I care about. Now I'm in turmoil. I want to make things right with you and still feel the need to deal with your husband. It's been so long since I felt real love, and I want that with you. I've spent this last year driven by anger and revenge. I believe your husband may be seeing Rachel again since they've reconnected, and now she's divorced. How do you feel about me, Carly? I need to know, so I can figure out what to do. I promise, no matter what your feelings are, I would never hurt you. I'm not that kind of man. I know I've been vengeful, and I'm hard-nosed as hell, but there's a side of me that hasn't seen the light of day in a long time. I want to show you that side. Please give me a chance. I could be the kinder, gentler person you deserve. Deep down, I know you're the one. There's a decent guy in me, but I need your help to let him out. Help me, Carly, and after that, maybe we could build something real and lasting together." "Kevin," she said softly, "this is all so much. My mind is racing with questions, and I don't have the answers right now. I don't even know what I feel, for you, for my husband, or for myself. I need time to process everything you've told me. Please understand that I'm not playing games or trying to push you away. I just need some time. I want to help you because you seem to be in so much pain, but I'm not sure I know how." After a somewhat emotional dinner, I walked Carly to her car. I told her I was sorry if I had upset her, but I felt she needed to hear the truth. I promised I'd work with her to find a solution to both of our problems. Maybe it wasn't the best time to tell her about my growing feelings, but I couldn't keep them inside any longer. I just wanted her to know. She let me give her a light hug before she left, but I felt like I hadn't solved anything, maybe even made things worse. The next day, I couldn't wait to see her again. I went to the restaurant where we usually had lunch, but she never showed up. My mind raced with fear. Did she confront her husband? Did something happen to her? I was anxious, unsure if I should call or wait another day. I struggled to focus on anything else that day, Carly dominating my thoughts. That evening, my phone rang. It was Carly, and she sounded upset. "Kevin, I need to see you. I know I said I wouldn't come to your place, but things have changed. I need to see you tonight. Can I stop by?" "Carly," I said, relieved, "I was so worried when you didn't show up at lunch. Did something happen? Did he hurt you?" "If he did." "No, Kevin," she interrupted, I need to talk to you. Come over now. I'll be here waiting." I hung up, and a moment later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Carly standing there, a smile on her face. "I followed you home because I needed to know if you were genuinely interested in helping me. When you answered the phone the way you did, I could tell you were being honest. I'm sorry for putting you through that little test, but I had to be sure." God, I was so glad to see her. I pulled her into a big hug. She felt so good in my arms. "Why didn't you go to work today?" I asked. She replied, "Last night, I spent the whole evening trying to clear my head." Jim came home late, using his usual excuse of working late. I tried to be affectionate with him, but he wasn't interested. He just said he was tired and went to bed. I thought to myself, if a man turns down someone like Carly, something's definitely off. Carly continued, "This morning, I waited for Jim to leave for work. I decided to do some detective work. I started searching through the computer files, looking for anything unusual. Since I work on computers, I know my way around them. Because of the information you gave me, I was able to trace a few files. Here's what I found." She handed me a pile of documents, explaining them so I wouldn't have to read through all the details. She looked at me seriously and said, "First, I need to tell you that I don't love Jim anymore. After everything I discovered about him, I think I actually despise him. I don't like feeling used, and that's one of my concerns with you. I care for you, but another part of me worries that you just want to use me for revenge and then move on." I took her hands and held them gently. "For now, I want to keep our relationship in a safe place," she said. "If you care for me like you say, let's wait until our lives become clearer before we proceed. What do you think?" I smiled at her, feeling hopeful. "That's all I ask for, a chance to prove myself. I really do care about you. And if I start moving too fast, just tell me to slow down. Can we seal our agreement with a kiss before we dive into your detective work?" She grinned at me, playfully shaking her head. "No, let's get started. My husband applied for this job here. He wasn't just transferred like he said. He asked to be transferred. That was his first lie. This is his old hometown where he grew up. I didn't think much about it then. I just assumed he wanted to return to familiar ground. I loved him, so I agreed to the move. He went to his class reunion about 16 months ago. Did your ex-wife go to it? And did you attend?" I replied, "I had a family engagement that weekend. It was my mom's birthday. I skipped the reunion because I thought they were usually boring anyway. But now that you mention it, my wife did have a reunion. I had an out-of-town business trip that weekend and asked her to come along, but she said she wanted to catch up with her old friends. I never thought anything of it until now." "Wow, you're a pretty good private investigator. Here's a copy of some emails between them just before the reunion," she said. "They're not love letters, but it's clear they were expecting to see each other. And here are a couple of emails after the reunion. As you can see, when you caught them together about 4 months later, it wasn't their first time meeting up, they had been involved for 4 months already." I felt my anger rising as I realized I had been misled. Hearing her say, "Oh honey, it's not what you think, it just happened," only fueled my frustration. I thought my revenge against her was over since we were no longer married, but now everything had changed. Carly could see the hurt and anger in my eyes. I told her, "I'm not mad at you, but being betrayed by my ex-wife really gets to me." Then I looked over at Carly and said, "I really need a kiss right now to calm me down, or I might just punch a hole in the wall." I stood up and walked toward the wall when she called out, "Stop, you idiot. I'll kiss you." She got up, came to me, wrapped her arms around me, and kissed me gently for a few seconds. When our lips finally parted, I looked into her eyes and leaned in to kiss her again, this time with a bit more feeling. As we separated the second time, she smiled and said, "That's enough, Tiger. I'm only human too." We sat back down, and I thanked her. She met my gaze and replied, "My pleasure. I really mean it, pleasure. Now let's get back to work, I can't be here all night." We both laughed, sharing a moment of relief. She handed me copies of her husband's cell phone records for the past year. As you can see, this number is called almost daily. I called the phone company, and it belongs to a Rachel Miller, that's my wife's maiden name. I didn't even know she took it back. I never knew she had a cell phone. When was it purchased? I asked. According to my husband's records, it must have been about a month before he was beaten up by a couple of thugs named Kevin, she said, smiling. That means she had the phone before you caught them, which explains why they got away with it for so long. It also explains why she didn't fight for more money during the divorce. some of this might have come out, and it wouldn't have helped her case. What about you, Carly? Where do you stand in all this? For me right now, it's mostly pride, but you're still married to him, she replied, knowing I had said us instead of you. I want to take him for everything he has. I want to make him sorry he ever did this to me, to embarrass him in public. But how do I do all this without losing my dignity? I want to keep my pride, and hopefully, you too. Carly, do you think you can live in the same house for a couple of weeks without giving anything away? No problem. I just don't want to be intimate with him. Other than that, I can manage dinner or two. If he continues to see his girlfriend regularly, I should be fine. Well, to start, you need to go shopping. We can go during lunch if you like. Make sure to use joint credit cards in both your names. We don't want you to get in trouble using cards in his name alone. Run up as much debt as you can, take some cash advances, and put the money in a savings account or buy bonds or stocks. Kevin, aren't you a stockbroker? Why aren't you investing for me? She asked. I didn't want you to have any doubts about me. I really care for you and want you to trust me. I can invest the money for you if you like. I just want you to know that I don't want any of it. I'm here to help you. If you decide to be intimate with me at some point, that will be my reward. We figured the credit cards would be our starting point. As she got up to leave, I asked if I could get any more kisses that night. She wrapped her arms around me, opened her mouth slightly, and kissed me again. I felt like a teenager again. When she pulled away, she said with a grin, "Damn, you're good. See you tomorrow." She smiled and got into her car. The next day, instead of having lunch, we went to a couple of banks using her joint credit cards. She took thousands of dollars as cash advances, giving her a month to make all her transfers before the credit card bills came due. She was smart, not maxing out any cards in case he used them. She discovered he was charging a motel room twice a week on one of the cards. We spent 3 days doing the bank thing with 7 different cards. I took the checks and invested all the money for her in tax-free government bonds and other accounts that would be hard to access. I put the accounts in my name so her husband wouldn't be able to touch the money, but made her a co-signer so I couldn't withdraw anything without her signature. I wanted her to feel safe about the investments and about me. I started checking on my ex, but couldn't find much. I shared whatever information I could with Carly, who ran with it. She found out that Rachel was now working for the same company as her husband and was one of the company secretaries. Carly used her connections to discover where they spent their time outside of work. They were getting sloppy after cheating for so long, thinking no one noticed. Carly had her girlfriend start taking pictures and notes on their activities. I found out that everyone loved Carly, the other secretaries respected her and called her whenever they had computer problems. They never felt belittled or made fun of because Carly always took the time to explain procedures to them. Everyone felt protective of her. I was uncertain about my revenge. How could I go about it? I couldn't act against Carly, especially since she was the only good thing in my life. My ex-wife was out of my life, but I wouldn't mind getting a little revenge on her since this affair had been ongoing before our divorce. But how could I do it without Carly's help? I wasn't sure I could pull it off. Carly had told me she couldn't be intimate with me right now. If she did, she wouldn't be any better than my cheating wife or her husband. She did care for me, but she was still a married woman. I needed a plan. As I mentioned before, I had been in a bad place for a year. I worked out and kept myself in good shape, as I was often around friends who were of questionable nature, pimps and escorts, to be frank. I was their investment broker, and together we made a lot of money. Yes, I had been involved with a few of the escorts. Believe it or not, some of them were genuinely nice people, while others weren't so great. Luckily, I knew which were which. They were good to have as friends, as they brought a lot of business my way because I didn't belittle them. I might not have agreed with their lifestyle, but they were people too. I called one of my pimp friends, asking him for a favor. After I explained it to him, he laughed out loud and said, "Man, you are really going for it. Just know it's going to cost you. There are no freebies in this world." I told him, "No problem, Big Louie, as long as it's done right. There might even be a bonus for you." Finally, my plan was starting to come together. Carly and I met one evening to strategize. She was worried that I might still want to take her in public, which went against everything she believed in. She truly was a special woman with good character. I promised her, with God as my witness, that I would never hurt or embarrass her in any way. She smiled, one that could melt ice, and said, "I think I'm falling for you big time, just thought you should know." I asked her to take the next couple of days off, whether as vacation or sick days, it didn't matter. We only had a couple of days to set up this sting operation, and it had to work like clockwork to succeed. "Well, what's the plan, Kevin? How are you going to get revenge without involving me? What do you need me to do?" "First, stop asking so many questions," I said with a smile. "Next Wednesday, they have room 109 booked, right?" "Yes, they have it reserved until 10 in the evening. They always reserve the same room for about 5 hours. It's not the best motel, but they rent it by the hour. Funny thing is, the way Jim made love to me, he could have rented it for 15 minutes and saved a lot of money." "Okay, tomorrow I'm reserving the same room for Wednesday morning. While I'm setting up a remote-operated VCR, you need to see my lawyer. Sally Hawk is the best take-no-prisoners lawyer out there. Here's what I want you to have written up, your divorce decree stating that you want a divorce under these circumstances. Then, Wednesday night, you'll need to get Jim's signature on it." "How do you know he'll sign it, Kevin? What if he says no?" "Don't worry, Carly, I'm almost positive he'll sign it. The consequences are too great for him. Do you want me to tell you the whole plan, or do you want to wait for the surprise?" "My God, Kevin, you're making me a nervous wreck. I don't think I could wait to find out anything. You seem so excited, and it's rubbing off on me. You're very special to me, and I want you as much as this revenge. We will get the revenge, it's for both of us. I just hope you feel the same about me as I do about you. Then my revenge will be complete." "Are we going to completely ruin their lives, Kevin? I don't feel good about that. I just want to get even. We're going to put their lives in turmoil, but their lives will go on unless they're foolish enough not to sign your divorce papers. Okay, sweetheart, here's the plan. They usually meet between 5 and 6 since Jim typically arrives about half an hour before Rachel. We're going to set him up. I have my friend Big Louie stopping by to pay Jim a visit. He'll have Sally and Sue with him, 2 escorts who aren't working right now due to a health issue. I'm paying them to have unprotected interactions with Jim." "Big Louie, how do you know these people, Kevin?" "They're my clients. They bring in a lot of money, and I help them invest it. When Rachel shows up, she'll have a choice, be with her lover Jim or let Big Louie take his chance. During all this, you and I will be in the van, running the remote control. When the time is right, you'll walk in, catch them in the act, and ask for a divorce. Then you'll go over to the closet and give Jim a choice, sign the divorce papers or I'll leave with the tape and send a copy to his employer and the company's home office. The choice will be his. After that, you'll come back to the van. Big Louie will be there to protect you from any harm and won't leave until you do. What do you think, Carly? Is it a go?" She smiled at me and said, "You're doing this more for me than for yourself, aren't you? God, you know there's another side of you, and I'm beginning to like it very much. It's a go." Over the next few days, we set everything up. Carly met with Sally Hawk, our lawyer, who wanted to be there personally to serve Jim with the divorce papers. There was no doubt she would get his signature on the legal document. She was the most well-known divorce lawyer in the state. Sally thought this was such a cool plan and mentioned that we had sent her a lot of business over the years. She was a good friend and wanted to be part of the sting. Big Louie was ready. We paid him in advance and told him he'd get an extra $500 if all went well. He just smiled and said, "No problem." I went over to the motel and rented the room for the afternoon on Wednesday. The desk clerk informed me I had to be out by 4 p.m. because the room was already booked. I met up with Carly, and we went to a nice restaurant for lunch. To my surprise, I spotted my ex-sister-in-law having lunch with a man who wasn't her husband. I told Carly who it was, and she asked if it would interfere with our plans. I explained that the man with Karen was not her husband, so since she didn't know Carly, we could enjoy our lunch. When Karen saw me, she looked horrified, caught in the act. I could see she was extremely nervous, wondering who I was with. Carly quickly caught on. She moved into the seat next to me instead of across from me and turned my face toward her, kissing me passionately. Not only was Karen watching, but so was everyone who could see us. Carly pulled back and smiled, saying, "Think that got anyone's attention?" Then she kissed me again, stopping when the waiter made some strange noises. I looked at the waiter and said, "She is one beautiful woman, isn't she?" He replied, "Yes, she is, sir." I turned to Carly and said, "She belongs to me, don't you, sweetheart?" "Only you, baby." "I belong only to you," she smiled. I hoped it was true, knowing she was putting on a show for my ex-sister-in-law to give her something to talk about. Karen never did come over to see us, which made me wonder why. Carly and I finished our lunch and then headed out the door. We stopped by an electronics store to pick up the equipment we needed. As we were checking out, Carly said the kiss in the restaurant was genuine. She meant it even though it was partly to spite my ex-sister-in-law. Wednesday morning came, and Carly and I were both on edge. Any sting operation raises the nerves. Every detail had to be timed and executed perfectly. Carly met with Sally to ensure the divorce papers were in order. I went to the motel room and set up the video equipment, parking the rented van just around the side of the building so it wouldn't attract attention. That evening, I went with Carly to see Big Louie. When he saw Carly, he exclaimed, "Man, who's the beautiful lady?" I introduced Carly, and although she was nervous, Big Louie had a way of putting people at ease. Standing about 6 feet 6 inches and weighing in at around 320 pounds, he was an impressive figure, but he was also very smart. He had a master's degree in business and was worth millions. I knew this because I was his finance broker. He could see Carly's nerves and reassured her, "Don't worry, little lady, no one's going to hurt you. Kevin's my friend, and I respect him. I'll make sure you're protected." She felt a little better and thanked him for his kindness. Lou said he and his girls would show up around 5:15 p.m., wanting to give Jim a few minutes to get settled. Earlier in the day, Carly had applied some of her computer expertise, sending an email to both Jim and Rachel. The note read, "Sweetheart, I have a very special treat for you tonight. When you arrive, please don't ask any questions. I know you'll be surprised, just go along with it. To make it extra special, let's not communicate the rest of the day. I want this to be a night you'll always remember. Love you." At 4:45 p.m., Carly and I got into our van and waited. At exactly 5 p.m., Jim arrived and went into the room. We were very nervous. This was a big undertaking for us. At 5:15 p.m., we watched as Big Louie approached the room with Sally and Sue. As they knocked on the door, we turned on our cameras, ready to document everything. We had 2 cameras running, one from above and another from inside the smoke alarm. The picture quality was surprisingly good for a pinhole camera. I reminded myself to retrieve the cameras tomorrow. Carly and I were on edge as Big Louie knocked on the door. When it opened, we heard Jim say, "Who are you?" Louie explained that he was paid to bring 2 women to the room for some fun. Jim said there must be some mistake. Louie pressed, asking if Jim had a problem having a good time with the ladies. Jim acknowledged he was Jim Nelson but hadn't expected company. Louie informed him that they were prepaid for their time and that there would be no refunds. He then pushed his way in and told his girls to help Jim get comfortable. We started recording. Jim appeared nervous, likely thinking this was the surprise Rachel had for him since he had received an email earlier. Little did he know, it was something entirely different. Sally and Sue were attractive women, skilled at what they did. However, they were also carrying a serious health risk that could be transmitted easily. Big Louie relaxed in a chair, watching as the scene unfolded. Carly, monitoring from our remote, felt a mix of sadness and satisfaction, sad that her husband of 5 years chose to betray her, but glad that her plan for revenge had begun. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and Big Louie opened it to reveal Rachel. She stepped inside, and upon seeing Jim with another woman, she was taken aback. All she knew was that Jim had sent her an email about something special for the night. Big Louie told Rachel to disrobe. She was frightened, but he assured her he meant no harm, he was just there to keep things safe. Sue urged Rachel to hurry up, and the cameras captured everything. Meanwhile, Jim and Rachel were caught up in the moment. Sally and Sue, having completed their part, were getting ready to leave when we heard a knock on our van door. It was Sally Hawk, our lawyer. She glanced at the monitor, noticing Jim and Rachel together. Then came Carly's explosive entrance. "You goddamn son of a, you're a worthless piece of," she shouted, using every curse word she could think of. "I want a divorce, and I want it now." Jim and Rachel froze, realizing they had been caught. Carly continued, "Why, Jim? Why wasn't I good enough? I knew you were having an affair. I hoped you'd get it out of your system, but you just kept going. I've had enough. I want a divorce as soon as possible." Sally Hawk stepped in, introducing herself to Jim. "Jim, I'm Carly's lawyer. The terms of the divorce are clear. Carly will go home tonight and have 24 hours to gather her belongings. You will not be there when she returns. After that, she will never come back to this apartment, which is in your name, so you can have it." Sally continued, "You are responsible for all bills due before today, including any credit cards held in your name or jointly. Carly will return all joint credit cards tonight and will no longer use them. She'll be responsible for any cards solely in her name. Each of you has your own car and will be responsible for your vehicle's insurance, payments, and upkeep. Lastly, the savings account with a balance of $88,000 will go to Carly, who will withdraw the money from the account tomorrow. You have a 401k with over $80,000, and Carly has one with $115,000. You will both keep your own 401k(s). If you agree to these terms, you will need to sign the decree tonight. It is irrevocable, and neither of you can make changes after it is signed. Carly has already signed, just sign on the line that says husband." Sally handed him the document to review and sign while Rachel watched. Jim asked, "What if I don't sign it tonight? What will you do?" Sally replied, "That document will be voided in 5 minutes when I leave. Then we'll go to court and request the same benefits, but we'll ensure to get half of your 401k. This is a good deal for you, so I advise you to accept it." Carly walked over to the closet and produced a tape. "This is a recording of tonight's events, and it will be part of our divorce case." Jim responded, "I'm not that foolish. You can't use that tape. It was taken without permission." Sally laughed, "You really are mistaken. We won't use it in the divorce, but we'll make copies and send it to your company. I'm sure they wouldn't approve of their married employees having affairs." Jim stepped toward them, but Big Louie re-entered the room. "You weren't going to hurt my friends, were you?" Jim backed off. "Well, Jim, you have 3 minutes to decide, and then we will be leaving," Sally stated. Rachel turned to Jim and whispered, "Sally Hawk was my husband's lawyer, and I didn't get a dime. She's one of the best in the state. You better take that offer or you'll be in serious trouble. Plus, we'll lose our jobs if that tape gets into the wrong hands." Sally interjected, "1 minute, and then we're out of here. See you in court." As they turned to leave, Jim called out, "Wait, I'll sign it, but only if I get the tape." Carly looked at Big Louie and handed him the tape. "After Sally and I walk out of here, you can give this tape to him." She also handed him an envelope with a promised bonus of $500. Sally reiterated, "This document is irrevocable. If you have any questions, you must contact me. You are not to bother Carly in any way, or I will have you arrested. If you understand everything I've said, then sign the document, and I'll give you a copy along with the tape and joint credit cards. Remember, Carly has 24 hours to take whatever she wants from the apartment. Your divorce is considered no fault and should be finalized within 2 months." Jim signed the papers, and Sally provided him with a copy. Carly and Sally then walked out the door. Shortly after, we saw Big Louie hand the tape to Jim before exiting to join his companions. Carly and Sally got back in the van, both smiling. Carly gave me a quick kiss. Everyone seemed happy until Sally added, "Kevin, until the divorce is final, you cannot see Carly. We can't have anyone seeing the two of you together. As long as you two aren't linked, everything should go as planned. I know we will face challenges with the credit card money being taken out in the last 2 weeks, but our documents are on our side unless someone thinks Carly is trying to defraud the banks. That's why I let Jim keep his 401k. There's enough money there for the banks to go after him if he tries to file for bankruptcy. Also, there's no money in Carly's name except for the $88,000 she'll withdraw tomorrow. I suggest keeping it in the same bank, but only in your name to lessen any questions. Sally continued, after the divorce, there should be no more problems, and you two can reconnect if you choose. That will be up to you, Kevin. You mentioned that your employer asked you to go to another state to set up a brokerage firm for a couple of months. I advise you to take that opportunity as soon as possible. Carly will be fine. I'll keep an eye on her. I hate to say it, but right now, you are her biggest problem. Of course, I can't force you to do anything, but I highly recommend it. Carly was in tears, so I held her close. I knew Sally's words were true. I was the weak link in the chain. I kissed Carly goodbye and told her to contact me after the divorce. I would wait for her. Sally drove Carly home so she could collect her belongings. They had picked up a U-Haul earlier to help her move. Sally mentioned I could call her if I needed to talk or wanted updates on Carly. After the girls left, I checked the monitor and noticed that Jim and Rachel had gone. I gathered my equipment and took an extra copy of the tape, just in case we needed it later. Funny how no one ever questions if there's a second copy, 2 cameras, 2 recording machines. I collected everything and headed home, feeling both happy for Carly and sad for myself. The next day, I talked to my boss about the temporary job in Chicago, which I would be leaving for on Friday. I genuinely hoped everything worked out for Carly. She truly was a wonderful person. It seemed like she had achieved her goal while I was left feeling out in the cold. Helping Carly had been enjoyable, and I realized I loved her. When I arrived in Chicago, I threw myself into work, starting a new brokerage firm from scratch. If I wasn't busy with work, I was in my room, missing Carly. Over the next couple of weeks, I often wondered how she was doing. One day, I called Sally Hawk. She was glad to hear from me and mentioned that everything was going as expected. Jim had hired a lawyer and wanted to fight the decree, but Sally advised him against it, knowing he wouldn't stand a chance against her. Sally shared that Jim was making accusations about Carly, claiming she had set him up, but he had no proof. She told Jim that if he continued with his accusations, she would take him to court, as she was fed up with his complaints. On another note, Sally informed me that both Jim and Rachel had acquired syphilis and were undergoing treatment, which brought a smile to my face. Carly had moved into a nice apartment near her work, taking about half of her belongings from their old place. For her safety, she was advised not to mention me, as they wanted to avoid any connections that could raise suspicions. Sally did mention that during their one-on-one talks, Carly expressed that she missed me and thought I was a really nice guy. Time seemed to drag on while I was in Chicago. I didn't feel much better than I had before all this drama unfolded. At least back then, I could see Carly daily. I visited my parents for Thanksgiving to escape for a few days. It was nice to spend time with family, and I even took my sister shopping, picking up gifts for everyone. I stopped by a jewelry store and bought an engagement and wedding ring for Carly, hoping that someday she would say yes. After the Thanksgiving holiday, I returned to Chicago, expecting to be there for another 3 weeks. The cold, windy loneliness of the city weighed heavily on me. The city lights looked beautiful, but they felt empty without someone to share them with. My colleagues and I successfully got the business off the ground, attracting plenty of clients eager to invest before the year's end. Upon returning to Ohio 2 days before Christmas, I called Sally Hawk. I didn't have Carly's new number, but I hoped to hear some good news. Sally was happy to hear from me and asked about the business. When I inquired about Carly and the divorce, there was a moment of hesitation before she confirmed it was finalized just 2 days prior. She couldn't give me Carly's phone number, but she offered to let Carly know I was back in town. I thanked her and hung up, unsure of how to feel about Carly's new status. Eager to see her, I decided to visit our favorite restaurant where we used to meet for lunch. My friend Marcia spotted me and came over to chat. I learned that Carly had taken the divorce hard and had been focusing on work, turning down dates and not looking as happy as before. Marcia said everyone still cared about Carly and hoped she would find someone who truly deserved her, considering the difficult situation with her ex-husband. I asked Mara if Carly was working today. She replied that Carly had received a call about an hour ago and left for the afternoon, not returning until after Christmas. I wished Mara a Merry Christmas and asked her to say hi to her family for me before heading home. Upon arrival, I found nothing on the answering machine, which started to depress me. Just as I was feeling low, the phone rang. I jumped up, hoping it was Carly, but it was just another telemarketer. Frustrated, I slammed the phone down. I knew Carly needed to call me about her investments, but in reality, she didn't have to. Other agents could update my files while I was away. Deciding to check in, I quickly rang the office, but all I got was voicemail. I glanced at the clock, surprised to see it was already 5:12 p.m. The office would be closed until Monday for the holidays. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Did I still have her, or had I lost her? I needed to know something to make it through this weekend. Then, the phone rang again. I rushed to answer, and this time it was Sally, my lawyer. She called to let me know she had informed Carly that I was back. She also wanted to share that everything regarding the divorce was final. Jim couldn't file any more motions. He had to cash in more than half of his 401k to settle the credit card charges. I thanked Sally for the update and wished her a Merry Christmas. A knock at the door interrupted me. It was Mary, my neighbor, who collected my mail and tidied up my apartment while I was away. I invited her in for a few minutes. Mary was a lovely older woman who cleaned apartments to supplement her income, usually coming twice a week. She handed me my mail and offered me a tray of homemade cookies for the holidays. I quickly got an envelope with 3 crisp $100 bills as a Christmas gift for her. She smiled and thanked me before leaving. We definitely need more kind people like Mary in this world. Feeling hungry, I called the local pizza shop to order a pizza for delivery and asked them to pick up a 12-pack of Miller Lite beer on the way. That's one of the perks of living in a smaller city, those hometown conveniences. I turned on the TV to catch the latest news while waiting for my pizza. About half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I got up to answer it, expecting the pizza delivery. To my surprise, it was Carly, beaming at me with a big smile. Tears welled in my eyes as I said, "I thought you were the pizza guy." She replied with a laugh, "Sorry to disappoint you, no pizza, just me." I pulled her into the living room and hugged her tightly. "I missed you, Carly. I missed you terribly. It's so good to see you again." She looked ready to speak when the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find the pizza guy had arrived with my order. After quickly paying him, I turned back to Carly and asked, "Are you hungry? We've got pizza and beer." Carly smiled and said, "You really are a funny guy." I was all prepared with what I wanted to say, but now I can't even think straight. "I have a couple of things to tell you, and then we can enjoy the pizza while it's still hot. I know you hate cold pizza." "Okay, big guy. I missed you too, by the way. In case you didn't hear, I'm now a divorced woman," she said. "I just found out today you were back. I didn't want to leave you a voicemail, that would have felt too tacky. I left work early after Sally told me you were home. I went out to buy you a kind of Christmas present. You'll see it after we eat." As I got us some paper plates, I asked, "What kind of present?" She just smiled that warm, inviting smile and said, "You'll see. Now eat your pizza and pass me a beer." As we enjoyed our meal, we talked about her job and how well it was going. I shared details about the agency we had opened. We both skirted around the deeper issues that would come up later. Once we had our fill of pizza, Carly looked at me and asked, "Are you ready for your kind of present now?" I smiled and replied, "Yep, where is it?" Carly held up a small sack, about the size of a small lunch bag. "I'll be right back," she exclaimed as she left the room. While she was away, I retrieved the ring I had bought for her, slipping it into my pocket. "Are you ready?" she called from the bedroom. I yelled back, "I think so." When she walked in, she said, "I got this for you today. You get to unwrap it if you like," she said, standing there and revealing clothes. She looked at me and said, "I'm no longer a married woman, and I wouldn't be cheating on any husband now. If you want your present, we can go into the bedroom." Tears streamed down my face as I took in the sight of the woman I had wanted for over a year, standing right in front of me. I looked at her and said, "On one condition." Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the ring and asked, "Will you marry me?" She started crying and ran up to me. As I hugged her, she exclaimed, "Yes. I'll marry you." Yes, yes, yes. God, how I have grown to love you. I lifted her into my arms and carried her into the bedroom. I wanted this moment to be special. I took my time, kissing her gently, savoring the connection we were sharing. After some time, I rolled off her, and she cuddled close to me as we fell asleep. It had been a long while since I woke up next to someone I truly wanted. Carly took a shower while I slipped the leftover pizza into the oven. It always tasted better that way. As we ate, we talked about our lives, and I asked Carly when she wanted to get married. She replied that she wanted it to happen as soon as possible. By then, it was about 10 p.m. I called my lawyer, Sally Hawk. When she answered, I explained our situation and asked if she could help us get married the next day. Sally, Carly, and I want to get married as soon as possible, but tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and we need a judge. Do you know anyone? She laughed, saying, Carly called you, didn't she? I'm happy for both of you. Meet me at the courthouse tomorrow morning, and we'll get your marriage license. My husband is a judge, and I know he'll marry you. See you tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. The next morning, Carly, looking beautiful, and I, in a suit, met Sally at the recorder's office. After we got our license, we headed over to Sally's house. Her husband turned out to be a very nice guy. Carly didn't have much family nearby, just a few distant cousins, so we decided to surprise my family in Michigan with the news of our marriage. They were overjoyed. Ecstatic would be a better word. How could they not love Carly? She was definitely part of the family. After Christmas, we returned home, ready to start our new life together. We began moving her things into my apartment, enjoying every moment. The women at her work were thrilled for her and remarked that the old Carly was back. When Mara found out I was now her husband, she was surprised but relieved to hear that I had changed. Carly reassured her, Don't worry, Mara, he's a sweetheart, and I love him dearly. With the New Year's Eve party approaching, I asked Carly if she wanted to go to the bash of the year. I wanted to show her off to everyone, especially since our ex-spouses might be there. Carly looked thoughtful and then said, Kevin, I love you with all my heart, and I want everyone to know it. Yes, we will go to the New Year's party, my dear husband. I watched her get ready, and she looked stunning, wearing an outfit that drew admiration from everyone. At the party, we were invited to sit at various tables, including one with my boss and his group, as well as Sally and Judge Hawk. I leaned over to Sally and complimented her, saying I had never seen a lawyer look that good. As the night progressed, we danced together, and when other men asked Carly to dance, she always replied, Not this year. I only want to dance with my husband. We made a couple of exceptions for special friends, but this night was about us. While dancing, we unexpectedly encountered Karen, my ex-wife's sister. She looked surprised and exclaimed, Oh my God, it's Kevin! Karen exclaimed. I looked over at her and replied, Well, good evening, Karen, and Happy New Year to you. Turning to my wife, I said, I'd like to introduce you to my wife, Carly. Carly smiled warmly and said, Carly, this is Karen and her husband. Bob reached forward to shake Carly's hand and introduced himself. My name's Bob. Carly gave her signature smile and responded, Glad to meet you, Bob and Karen. Then she turned to Karen, recalling, Didn't we meet at Robson's restaurant on Old Route 40 about 2 months ago? Bob shook his head, saying, No, that place is too expensive for our tastes. I noticed Karen's face go pale as she replied, Nice meeting you too. We have to get back to our seats. We knew she would hurry back to tell Jim and Rachel that we were there. When we glanced over at their table, Rachel knocked over her drink upon realizing I was there. We saw her turn quickly to Jim, exclaiming, Oh my God, Jim, he's with your ex-wife. Jim nearly fell off his chair trying to get a look at us. Karen turned to Rachel and said, Rachel, he introduced her as his wife. Jim exclaimed, That son of a set us up. They took us for over $100,000, and now they've set us up to get a venereal disease. How did they know everything? Rachel replied, Kevin told me that someday he would get even with us. Jim suggested, maybe we can try taking them back to court. Karen laughed, Give it up, you too. Do you see who they're sitting with? Sally Hawk and a half dozen judges. And, if that's not enough, Jim, he could kick your butt from here into tomorrow. Make no mistake, Kevin's all man, and by the looks of his wife, she's all woman. They make a great couple. As midnight passed, the crowd began to thin. Sally and the judge said their goodnights, along with the others at their table. After our next dance, Carly and I decided to sit in a booth not far from Rachel, Jim, and their group. Carly excused herself to the restroom. When she returned, she noticed Jim and Rachel staring at her and me from the corner of their eyes. Carly asked me, "Are you ready?" I looked at her, puzzled, and replied, "Ready for what?" "To go home, honey." "No, Kevin. Are you ready for your revenge?" Then, right in front of Jim, Rachel, Karen, and Bob, she spoke loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Happy New Year, lover. Who says revenge isn't sweet? Happy New Year." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.